Hello, my name is Vinod. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Minnesota. I have glaucoma, which is a degenerative eye condition related to degeneration of the optic nerve. I lost vision in one eye, and the glaucoma was likely kickstarted by prescribing steroids to suppress my immune system after a different eye surgery. The glaucoma has progressed so that now I have a very large blind spot in my right eye so that I cannot see what I'm looking at, and I only have peripheral vision. That means I cannot drive, I cannot read anything printed. I rely on text to speech and speech to text on computers and phones in order to read anything or write anything. I met a patient of Dr. Yu at a waiting room of a different clinic, and he told me that he had gone from needing a white cane, becoming nearly legally blind, back to driving after 8 visits to Dr. Yu. He suffered from retinitis pigmentosa, which is not what I have, but I realized that, independent of that, it does mean that Dr. Yu has some insight into how to cure problems with the eye, and that's how I ended up here visiting Dr. Yu. The very first time I walked in, and he had a preliminary intake exam to figure out what my eye current status was. He gave me something to drink, and before I had really settled into my chair, I had not even finished reading one article on my phone. Well, listening to one article on my phone, he had me tested again, and that must have been maybe half an hour. And within half an hour, I was reading one more line on the eye chart, which just made no sense to me. But I could see that that was happening. So by the end of my trip, 2 weeks after, after a 2-week trip, a 2-week stay near his clinic and getting treatment, my eye condition had substantially improved. I tend to draw the shape of the blind spot that I have to help him understand how exactly I'm responding to his treatment. And so here's a picture of the blind spot, the shape of the blind spot, where the center is essentially the axis along which we are looking. And you can see the blind spot occupied a huge fraction of my field of view. This was in spring 2023 when I visited him. After 2 trips, at the beginning of the latest trip, that blind spot had shrunk to something substantially smaller. And in my latest visit, the progression has been even more rapid. When I say progression, I mean my response to treatment, with the result that right now my blind spot looks on the same scale, something like this. So I'm clearly seeing that my field of view has increased, the size of the blind spot has shrunk, and I hope to be more functional with a few more visits. So that's as far as the medical condition is concerned, but what that also means is mentally, it gives a lot more hope to patients that they feel there can be improvement. Glaucoma is something that modern science, for the vast majority of patients, can help with, in the sense that it can arrest, it can stop the further, modern science can stop the further degeneration of the optic nerve, but as far as I know, it cannot reverse the damage done, which is what I am seeing here. Not only is the spread of the blind spot stopped, it is actually shrinking. That's as far as glaucoma goes, but for other situations like retinitis pigmentosa, where modern science currently says there is no cure, I am seeing lots of patients who can clearly see differences in their visual field, improvements. So that mentally that makes a huge difference to how patients feel about their quality of life. You're talking about people who cannot drive, like me, people who cannot drive, people who cannot navigate airports on their own, and to see that this progression can be reversed makes a big deal, great difference to their quality of life and their mental state. It's true that Chinese medicine is based on very different principles. It does not treat all patients equally. It does not assume that a patient is at the center of a large Gaussian distribution. So the treatment is tailored to the constitution of the individual, and this does make it difficult to evaluate using using scientific principles, using statistical principles rather. It makes it difficult to evaluate the efficacy, but the approach is different, and it's related to looking at each individual rather than assuming that all patients are identical, which they are not. But nevertheless, it is not the case that so let me phrase it another way. Chinese medicine can help in situations where Western medicine cannot, but it is by no means guaranteed, because, for example, even for my glaucoma treatment, for 2 years I was undergoing Chinese, TCM. I was being helped by a TCM practitioner in Minneapolis, and it made absolutely no difference. The thing with Chinese medicine is that it depends on the practitioner's understanding of the principles of Chinese medicine far more than in the case of Western medicine, where there is a standard protocol that everybody applies to all patients. Here, the practitioner, the doctor, has to understand how to use the principles of Chinese medicine for each patient, and that can change from doctor to doctor. Dr. Yu seems to understand that very well. That's why he is very successful. Much more than my expectations, because I wasn't really expecting much when I walked in for the first time. When people are desperate because they have been told by modern Western medical practitioners that the best they can do is manage the progression of the disease, there is not much hope. But when you walk in here and you meet people in the waiting room who have been continuously helped over several years by Dr. Yu, and then when one experiences it oneself, when one sees the change in blind spot size, for example, then the expectations are wildly exceeded.